All right. Good evening, everyone. It's nice to be with you in this platform. I think this is our fifth one, so we still have three left. And now we are trying to get into some practices of interfaith dialogue. At the time, so we might want to get back to some documents, but religious dialogue is also about practice, and it covers diverse sets of practices as you learn from the text. And I'll send you another chapter from the same book by the same author, Father Tom Michel. Father Tom Michel is a great Jesuit priest who did a lot of dialogue in Asia, interfaith dialogue, and he was working for the Federations of Asian Bishops Conferences in Bangkok for many, many years. He is a scholar of Islam, now residing in the northern part of Thailand in a small college founded by the Jesuits there. He is from America, from St. Louis, and then he came to Indonesia and kind of fell in love with Islam, and then he decided to study Islam. He got a doctorate in Islamology, Islamic studies from, I think, Columbia University, if I'm not mistaken, in the US. And then he worked after that, after his graduate degree, in the field of interfaith dialogue. At some point, he was also in the Vatican helping the Father General of the Society of Jesus, overseeing this interfaith enterprise by the Society of Jesus. So he's really somebody who is well versed in the practice of interfaith dialogue, a man of great compassion to others, mainly Muslim, Hindu, Buddhist brothers in Asia. At some point, he was also in Ankara teaching at a Islamic university, or state university rather, in Ankara, Turkey, for some years. So he has a lot of experience, tons of experience actually, in terms of interfaith dialogue. So I've sent you the one chapter on the four forms of interfaith dialogues, and you might have read that chapter, and we'll discuss about that. And also the most important thing is that that kind of text and experience should inspire you, inspire us in one way or another. Inspire us to do something creative, to do something new, perhaps in our own context. So let me send you first the other chapter from which I draw some inspirations for the material for today, for this evening. All right. So again, after a few weeks of discussing mainly documents, although we shared our experiences as well already, we now try to look for certain practices of interfaith dialogue within the Catholic Church, things that are connected to the practices of interfaith dialogue in the Catholic Church. As I mentioned over and over again, the Catholic Church has been a pioneer in the field of interfaith dialogue in the world, actually, starting in the 60s and so forth. And now we have been doing this for 50 years or so. So there have been many practices in that regard. But I'll start with the definition of interreligious dialogue. And I've sent you the chapter, another chapter about this from Father Thomas F. So what is interfaith dialogue, interreligious dialogue? Oftentimes, interfaith dialogue has been understood as a practice by the religious elites, by theologians, by leaders of the communities. They come together for nice picture, nice discussions, avoiding difficult questions, avoiding sensitive issues. They dodge difficult questions. They try to avoid controversies and so forth. They say things that are nice to each other. Try not to offend the religious sensibilities of people. And then they pose for picture. At the end of the gathering, they exchange handshakes and smiles and so forth, as if everything has been very good. Life is good, dialogue is fine. Now let's enjoy each other. Uh, Things like that. So in the minds of people, interfaith dialogue is a formal and celebratory kind of events where people are gathered, mainly leaders of religious communities of that kind, of that nature. Father Thomas F in his chapter tries to refute that kind of idea, popular idea about interfaith dialogue. Interfaith dialogue is not interreligious tea party. It's not feel-good kind of gathering. It's not a kind of gathering that is geared only toward shallow, cliche kind of exchange of views. It has to be more than that, deeper, more engaging, sometimes more difficult, but it's also more real. It is related to life itself. It's not related to formalities, but rather to the dynamics of concrete lives, um, lives that are intertwined between believers of different religions that share the same space of life, the same circle of friendships, the same actually earth, right? We call our earth a common home now for that reasons, actually. Um, so in the faith or in the eyes of people, if interfaith dialogue is too formal, if it is only done by religious leaders in the media, we can see all those things, pictures and videos of interfaith dialogue, then that kind of dialogue raises suspicion. It can be considered to be a waste of time, actually. No actual use of it, useless, waste of time, even it compromises our faith because we try to say something nice, we try to avoid confrontations or discussions on hard questions. We try to only talk about superficial themes and insights and topics. So, in a way, we are not free to offer a critical view of the other or to offer our own understandings of our own faith in ways that are perhaps too honest for fear that we might offend others. So this is the kind of tiptoeing, dialogue. We tiptoe around the sensibilities of other people's, the participants in the dialogue. So that kind of dialogue can be seen as a compromise of faith, actually. So Father Thomas F tries to debunk this kind of understanding of dialogue. Dialogue is much more than that. It's not a tea party, interreligious tea party. And he cited an important document by Pope John Paul II from the year of 1990 called the Redemptorist Mission, that interreligious dialogue is a must and a call to every Christian. We have no option, actually. In that sense, this document by Pope John Paul II, again, is revolutionary, radical in saying that you don't have any option as a Christian other than to embrace the practice of interfaith dialogue. You have to do something about it. You can't just stay silent or stay as bystander in this field of or aspect of interfaith dialogue. You have to do something. And for most Christians, he would say in the document that what he means by that, a call for every Christian to do interfaith dialogue is in the form of dialogue of life. It is not a dialogue of experts. It's not dialogue of theological exchange, theological discussions. It's not a dialogue of great humanitarian actions and platforms, for example. It's not a dialogue of prayers for the most part, formal prayers, but rather it's a dialogue of life. Dialogue that happens as our lives are intertwined with the lives of other peoples of other faiths, bearing witness to the moral character of our faith, to the spiritual character of our existence according to our faith. And the others, they also bear witness to their own. So we come together as religious believers living in the same space, and then we exchange the kind of witness of life, and we try to enrich our religious life, our spiritual life due to that, or in that kind of process. We will come back to that idea of dialogue of life later. But Pope John Paul II, Saint John Paul II again emphasizes the call to do interfaith dialogue for all believers, for all Christians, not just for experts or leaders of the church. And he said that dialogue, encounter, is characteristic of our missions as Christians once again. And dialogue is the other side of the obligation to proclaim our faith for those who are seeking. So dialogue is actually something that we can do to offer the perspective of our faith to those people who are still looking for something deep, something that can be called religion or religious tradition, religious values for their life. So we are invited once again to give witness, to tell people about the beauty of our faith, the beauty of our religious life, the beauty of our communion with one another, the beauty of the sacramental life that we have in the church, and so forth. The character of our faith as a social, as a faith that does justice, actually, working for the common good of the people, something like that. So, in other words, what he means by dialogue is also a way to proclaim our faith to those who are still seeking something deep for their life, something visionary, something religious, something spiritual that they're looking for. So it is a kind of a response to that hunger, that thirst on the part of those who are still seeking. And there are many in the world, those people who are seeking really this kind of spiritual home for them to dwell. So this is the vision of Pope John Paul II in Redemptorist Mission. And the questions now is, what about those who have found religion? In our world today, many people, the great majority of people, have found their religion. They're not looking for other avenues, so to speak. They're looking to deepen their own practice, their own way of practicing their religion, their way of living out their religion, right? So what about them? What do we do with them or to them? Do we have anything to say to them about whatever? But do we have something to say to them? We have to see what we can say, what we have to say to them. Those who have found religion, those who are committed to a certain religious traditions, those who love their religion so much that there is no real possibility for them to get converted from, to change their religious tradition or loyalty. So what do we say to them? This is a challenge of interfaith dialogue later. And then are there ways for us to be enriched by their lives, by their commitments, by their ways of living, of being moral, of doing things, of doing great things for the society, for example? Can we learn from them? as religious communities, as religious traditions, can we learn from their theologies? Can we learn from their spiritualities, their doctrines, their sacred scriptures, and so forth? So, and then other possibilities of working together with them. These are questions raised by Pope John Paul II in the text, Redemptorist Mission. And then finally, is there a possibility for us to turn away from them, to abandon them, to stay away from them, to be separate from them, to avoid them, because we have been convinced of our own truth? There's nothing to learn from them. There's nothing to say to them. So we withdraw to ourselves. We live our faith as if we are totally separated from them. This is an alternative, but I'm not sure if we want to pursue that path, right? On her part, the Catholic Church feels and is convinced that we have so much to communicate and much to learn from those religious communities and their followers. So Father Thomas F said that interfaith dialogue is nothing other than this whole world of positive relations with the followers of other religious traditions, right? It is dialogue, positive, the whole perspective of positive relations with other religions or the followers of other faiths. This is, in a broad sense, what is called interfaith dialogue. And in Redemptorist Mission, it is stated very clearly, it's there in the text, that the Spirit works in different religious traditions, in different cultures. Those non-Christian cultures, those non-Christian religions and peoples, they're also touched by the work of the Spirit. The Spirit is at work in them, within them, through them. There are things that are good found in those religious traditions, and as we mentioned again and again in Nostra Aetate, the groundbreaking document from Vatican II a few weeks ago, there are rays of truth that are found in those non-Christian religions. And in the Redemptorist Mission, it is stated very clearly that it is the work of the Holy Spirit. And moreover, it's very important, it's very insightful for me to see how for John Paul II, the faith commitment of other people would at times make Christians, all of us, Catholics included, ashamed of our lack of commitment, of our relaxed moral principles, of our permissiveness sometimes. Personally, sometimes when I see how Buddhist people, they try to live, or some Hindu people, they try to be vegetarian. They don't want to eat meat for the noble reasons in their religions. For example, I feel like I eat meat every day, and I feel like morally I am kind of below them. There is this kind of holy envy. They can do that, but I can't do that, right? It's hard for me to be a vegetarian, but seeing how they practice vegetarian so easily, sometimes not so easily, they have to struggle with that, makes me more humble in my religious conviction and assurance. I see how they are people of upright moral standards, moral life, right? So this is what is called normally holy envy, but something that is good, because we are envious of others' commitment, discipline in religious practices and faith. Pope John Paul II mentioned this in Redemptorist Mission. And also the role of common prayer and the role of analyzing the beliefs of others. All those two are included in the text. So if we want to do interfaith dialogue, we also include the role of common prayer. We should be able to pray together. We should try to look for different ways in which we can engage each other on the level of spirituality and prayer. I'm not sure if many of you have have this experience of praying outside of your own tradition, outside of the Catholic framework. And you are welcome to share your thoughts about the experience later. And also the role of analyzing the beliefs of others, studying the beliefs of others. It is encouraged in this document. Now comes the topic of sharing of life. Fr.Thomas clearly said categorically that dialogue is more than talk. Dialogue needs fresh existential approach. And Redemptorist Mission differentiates between different kinds of dialogue. The practices of dialogues. The first is exchanges between experts, theological, philosophical, doctrinal exchanges, seminars, conferences, together between experts and religious leaders. We do this all the time. And toward the end of this course, short course, we will look at how some non-Christians, our partners, try to do this kind of dialogue. There are Muslim experts and scholars, leaders who have offered their, for example, response to the call of the church to do this kind of study together, exchanges between experts. We'll see about that later again. And then the second form is cooperation for integral development and the safeguarding of religious values. The first is more academic, more doctrinal, more theological. The second one is geared toward action, common action for integral development for all. And then also to safeguard the religious values of ours, not just of our own religious traditions, but also the traditions of others. And then the third one is dialogue of life. Again, as I mentioned earlier, it consists of bearing witness to each other in daily life, to their own human and spiritual values. We show to each other how our faith is manifested in our life, in our way of life, in our spiritual life, in the way we present ourselves to others in the society, in the way we interact with the larger society, in the way we help each other to live according to those values as well, to work more just and fraternal society. So the idea of fraternal society, a society that is founded on fraternity, universal fraternity, that is emphasized in Fratelli Tutti, for example, this year, has been there actually in the message of Pope John Paul II. But Pope Francis makes that clearer and more crucial for our mission today. So these are the forms and practices of interfaith dialogue according to Redemptorist Mission. And there are 4 forms of dialogue to be more systematic. The first is on the level of being. There is this dialogue of life. We simply live our life. It's our being. So the exchange of our being, of our life, is dialogue of life. It's the most ordinary, the most natural, the most perhaps common. Is it the easiest? I would like to have your opinion on this. But in certain areas in Asia, for example, in Indonesia, I can talk more about this. Dialogue of life cannot be taken for granted now. People live in segregated areas. If you're a Catholic, for example, or a Protestant, a non-Muslim, you're not supposed to live in certain areas. You're not supposed to rent a house in certain areas. You're not supposed to buy a house there. You will be kicked out. You will be rejected, not by laws, but by those who have been there. Because there's this kind of segregation along the lines of religious identities. It's becoming this segregation is becoming more serious in certain parts of Asia as well. So is it possible under that kind of conditions to live as brothers and sisters with others, to share life, to bear witness to each other? I think it's becoming more difficult. And it's so sad to see that, because that's the most natural actually in Asia, being a place of religious pluralism par excellence, perhaps in the world, right? Asia is home to many ancient religious traditions. Great world religions come from Asia. But look at what happens to us. In many nation states, minorities are not allowed to occupy the same, territory, the same social space. They are kicked out. They are discriminated against. So the dialogue of life on the level of being is increasingly in jeopardy, is increasingly in danger of being wiped out by extremism, by discriminations of all kinds, right? This is the first. And the second form is on the level of doing, on the level of action, on the level of cooperation between religious communities and their adherents or their followers, the believers, right? If dialogue of life is impossible in certain areas, in certain kind of life situations, then is it possible to do something together by design? Can we respond to the real challenges of our life together if we live separately, if we don't see each other on daily basis, if we avoid each other, even as human beings? I don't think so. So this is a real challenge in today's world. Last week or 2 weeks ago, we discussed about the Abu Dhabi document. The Pope and the Grand Imam of Al-Azhar invite us to do things together, responding to the real challenges of humanity today: refugee crisis, poverty, discrimination, terrorism, and so on and so forth. But can we do it together if we live in a separate world? That's my question. And the third level is dialogue on the level of studying. It includes exchange of views. We study the religions of others, and then we try to understand that as deeply as possible, as authentically as possible. We study the religions of others together with the followers of others, or from within the traditions. We are not studying the religions of others as objective scholars, but we try to go into the dynamics of those religious communities and traditions. So it's a deep kind of study. We study other religions not for the sake of objective knowledge, but for the sake of common understanding. This is the level of studying. But again, this is higher level in the sense it needs more commitment. If you don't have dialogue of life, if you don't have cooperation, I think it's more difficult to really commit ourselves for many, many years, even our entire lives, to the study of the religious traditions of others. It's just impossible. There's no passion inside us. There's no desire that can sustain that kind of committed study of others, right? So this is more demanding. It needs some expertise, and it will not happen if the other two didn't happen either. What is the drive for that? What is the motivation for studying the religions of others if we don't want to share life with them? If we can't do anything together with them, right? And then the fourth level is the level of reflecting, or the level of reflection, religious experience. So it's the reflection on our experience of the divine. Then we share our religious experience with others. It is, in a sense, the highest level because it's very personal, right? Religious experience is very, very personal. It's very private, actually, in a way. We need trust in order to be able to share our deepest religious experience. So, what do you think? Can we do this in Asia now, in our lives? Going from dialogue of life, dialogue of action, dialogue of study, exchange of views, and then reflecting on the most fundamental kind of feature of being religious. Religion stands and falls on this level of experience. If you don't have religious experience, you know, the validity of your religious belief is kind of at stake. You need to have this faith experience, and we all do, we all have. But is there a way for us? Is there a level of trust we have with others to share this? Now, so this is the four forms of dialogue, four levels of dialogue, the practices of dialogue. Now, Fr.Thomas F said clearly that talking is important, but it should not dominate. So interfaith dialogue should not consist in discourse, using words, concepts, talks, seminars, conferences, right? Books, articles. Those are good things and they serve great purpose in dialogue. There are great works on interfaith dialogue that change the hearts of many, right? The writings of Gandhi about religion he famously said that my religion is truth. For example, that he falls in love with the Sermon on the Mount by Jesus, for example. It changes a lot of hearts, a lot of minds. Those who read that with certain openness, you know, they're touched by that. So they serve a purpose, definitely. But dialogue is also things that, I mean, it goes beyond the words. It goes beyond discourse, right? So it is interesting. Fr.Thomas F, as I mentioned, was working for the FABC. FABC is the Federation of Asian Bishops' Conferences, and it is, I think, based in Bangkok. And he served as a secretary for dialogue there for many years. So he mentioned that the bishops in Asia have actually offered this kind of vision of dialogue of life, dialogue as a way of life, long before Pope John Paul II wrote the document Redemptorist Mission that we just discussed. So in a way, the Asian bishops are quite forward-looking. They're pioneers in pointing this out. Coming from the context of Asia, they know that dialogue of life, that dialogue as a way of life, is perhaps the largest, the broadest, the more common, engagement with other religious traditions. It consists of dialogue of life, daily practice of brotherhood, being helpful to each other, on daily basis, helping each other on the small affairs or matters, being open-hearted to others on daily basis, offering hospitality to each other again on daily basis. For example, revering the elderly, taking care of them, also proper parenting. If we Christians also show how to properly raise our children, our young, it is a sign of witness as well. And then it helps to create a better society actually. And if everyone else is doing the same, then we will have a better society. If we care for the sick and the poor, all of us care for that. It's part of dialogue of life that is so, in a way, authentic, and it transforms our life on that, micro level, locally. And in the article that I have sent you, Father Tom Michel offered or discussed examples, concrete examples of dialogues of all kinds, of all kinds. The first is dialogue for or dialogue of life in a way, and dialogue of actions. The first, MUCART, Muslim and Christian Agency for Rural Development in the Philippines. As you know, the Philippines has this kind of areas of conflicts in the south. Muslim and Christians, they fought against each other for many years, and the crisis is kind of still going on. And there are also, though, interfaith initiatives all along. They try to overcome the biases, the prejudices against each other. This is done by ordinary people, not by experts, not by leaders, but by farmers, by fishermen, by ordinary believers and ordinary citizens in the southern part of the Philippines. And they try to overcome old biases and prejudices, enmities, separation by doing things together, developing their society together, not by talking about religions, but by coming together closely, interacting closely on daily basis, so that they overcome their biases, their religious enmities. So this is one way, creative way, but they have to be committed to go beyond prejudices. And the second one is the study of media presentations of religions. It happens in North Africa and Europe. So they come together, young people, from the Christian religion and Islamic religion, they come together and they try to overcome media caricatures of the other. Islam has been presented in the Western media as a religion of fanaticism, of despotism, of gender inequality, of terrorism, and so forth, and so on. Christianity is also portrayed in different Islamic media as being the false religion, religion that has been superseded by Islam, and so forth. And Trinity and Christology are being attacked sometimes in the media, as being unbelievable, incredible in the negative sense of the word, nonsense and so forth, doesn't make any sense. So they come together and they are aware that media is playing this ambiguous role. It can distort religions, but it can also proclaim or disseminate true understandings of religion. So they try to use that, but they study together the role of media in propagating negative views, distorted views of each others, and then they try to build or to create good, better media representation of religions. It's good for young people, and it's good for all of us here at the age of now at the age of post-truth, of hoax, right, of false news, and so forth. And the third is educating youth for dialogue. Father Michel actually was telling a story about our program in Malaysia. I was personally there. I was one of the participants back then in 96, 97, a long time ago actually. But we came together as young Jesuits, young seminarians, and we try to get this feel of friendship, of being exposed to different religious traditions in Malaysia. We visited many people, many places, and it was a good experience of coming to know more personally, more directly, other religious traditions, the rituals, the people, the prayers, the practices, also the text, the history, and things like that. So it's important to have this personal encounter in dialogue, and it has to be done early on, right? And then the last is the monks in dialogue. So a dialogue between Christian and Buddhist monks is done in Europe, elsewhere as well, and they are dialoguing, and they are participating in each other's prayers and community life. One example is that Christian monks or Buddhist monks, they stay for 3 months in each other's monastery and monastic life. So, and they'll talk about that after that. After the experience, they reflect on the learning process by being a member of another monastic community. And I have the picture of Father Thomas Merton, late Roman Catholic monk, Cistercian monk from Kentucky in the US, a mystic as well, who believed there are many paths to God. He did this Eastern style meditations. He wrote about Eastern religions, Islam, and especially Buddhism. He was in dialogue with Japanese expert of Zen Buddhism. And he said that divinity dwelt in all things and all people. He died in Bangkok during this conference with Buddhist monks, actually, on his way actually to Indonesia to celebrate Christmas in the year of 68, I think. He died from electrocution, something like that. Something happened with the electricity in his room. So he said, I see no contradiction between Buddhism and Christianity. I intend to become as good a Buddhist as I can. We will talk about a figure like Thomas Merton later in the course if we have time. So he met with the Dalai Lama here on his visit and travel to Asia in Dharamsala, I think, in northern India. Now, almost the last, second last slide. Insights. 4 crucial insights by Father Thomas Michel on dialogue. The first, interreligious dialogue should take up the issues that respond to people's needs, not the needs of the leaders, not the needs of the experts, but to ordinary people's needs as well. And our hope that the dialogue will improve the quality of life of the people. It has to be serving a purpose, a real purpose, not for leisure, not a luxury, but rather something that we do out of necessity, because we need that in order for our life to go on, to have a quality, our life together in the societies in which we live. And it has to be appropriate to the cultural and educational background of the people. So it has to be authentic. We don't talk about theology, like mystical theology that is so high over the head, to ordinary believers. We have to set the agenda, the method as well, according to the background of the people. And then the second is dialogue of experts is crucial, but more important is dialogue done by ordinary believers. So we don't have to be expert to do this. If you feel that you are ordinary believers, the invitation is even greater for you to do this, to engage in this enterprise. And dialogue is crucial for the youth during their most formative years, through real encounters which lead to friendship and so forth. So dialogue among the youth is, I think, in a way, is so much needed to prepare for the larger involvement later. It has to be started early. And then religious experience is key to dialogue. We need trust before we can share our deep experience, though. So we have to look for ways in which we can go to that kind of deeper engagement. Talk is not enough. Action is not enough either. We have to be able to go to that level if we can, but we are not forcing ourselves into that level unless we are ready, unless there is trust that is built through dialogue of life and dialogue of action. And it can be done not only by monks, priests, sisters, religious brothers, bishops, but also by ordinary people, because ordinary people have religious experience, authentic religious experience, and they might be able to express that in a language that is easily understood by others. So I will conclude by posing these questions. What are the forms of dialogue that you find most relevant and relatable in your personal life and your church or communities? What would be your role in those forms of dialogue? And the second is, what are the forms of dialogue that you find most challenging? Why? I think those are simple questions, but it will bring our discussion into kind of real questions. All right, thank you so much for your attention.